Bonjour, bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. Before we begin, because we care about our interpreter, we have few preventive measures to share. Pour prévenir tous les incidents acoustiques perturbateurs potentiellement dangereux, nous vous rappelons de garder vos oreillettes éloignées de tous les microphones à tout moment. Lorsque votre oreillette n'est pas utilisée, tentez de la placer face vers le bas sur l'autocollant que vous trouvez devant vous. Et veuillez consulter les cartes sur la table pour connaître les lignes directrices pour les préventions des incidents acoustiques. This is new, Minister Freeland. So today we have with us... Exactement. So today we have with us la vice-première ministre Chrystia Freeland, le ministre de l'Environnement et des Changements climatiques Steven Guilbeault, le ministre de l'Énergie et des Ressources naturelles Jonathan Wilkinson, et se joint à nous à distance le ministre de la Protection civile Harjit Sajjan. I guess, Minister Freeland, the floor is yours.
Merci, madame, et bonjour. Je vous parlerai d'abord de nos crédits d'impôt à l'investissement et de nos crédits d'impôt pour les pompiers volontaires et les bénévoles en recherche et sauvetage. Le ministre Hardeep Singh Nijjar parlera ensuite des travaux en cours pour se préparer face à la saison des feux de forêt. Le ministre Wilkinson nous dira ce que nous faisons pour soutenir davantage la formation pour les pompiers et les pompières. Enfin, le ministre Steven Guilbeault parlera de l'engagement de notre gouvernement à lutter contre les changements climatiques. Our budget is about ensuring fairness for every generation, especially younger Canadians. And taking action on climate change is one of the most important things we can do to make sure younger Canadians have a fair chance at a middle-class life. Because the cost of inaction today would be borne chiefly by them. That is not okay. We will not leave them behind. That's why the Prime Minister convened an incident response group yesterday ahead of wildfire season. Last year, Canadians faced the worst wildfire season on record, with over 15 million hectares burned, 7 times the annual average. C'est pourquoi nous soutenons les premiers intervenants et les premières intervenantes du Canada et saluons leur courage en doublant les crédits d'impôt pour les pompiers volontaires et les volontaires en recherche et sauvetage. Ceci passe de 3 000 à 6 000 dollars. And that is why our government is investing energetically in growing Canada's clean economy. A cornerstone of our effort is our $93 billion suite of investment tax credits. Our investment tax credits are already working to give businesses the certainty and the support they need to make historic investments in Canada that create great jobs while reducing our emissions at the same time. And crucially, Canada is now at a place where our economy is growing while our emissions are coming down. A historic accomplishment and a necessary one. We have evidence to prove it. Just last month, we welcomed a historic $15 billion investment by Honda. That is Honda's largest ever investment in North America and is the largest investment in Canada's history by a single company. Honda is investing in Canada to create our first full electric vehicle supply chain, which is going to create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs across Ontario. And last November, we welcomed an $11.4 billion investment by Dow to build a first-of-its-kind net-zero emissions facility just outside Edmonton. This project will also support thousands and thousands of great jobs in Alberta. Ces investissements majeurs réalisés par des grandes entreprises internationales ont été stimulés par nos crédits d'impôt à l'investissement. 4 of our 6 investment tax credits are currently before Parliament. The Clean Technology and CCUS tax credits are in Bill C-59, and the Clean Hydrogen and Clean Technology Manufacturing tax credits are in the Budget Implementation Act. We sincerely hope that MPs from all parties will put aside partisanship and work together with us in the national interest to pass these essential investment tax credits into law before the summer. En 2023, le Canada a attiré plus d'investissements directs étrangers par habitant que tous les autres pays de G7. Nous étions au 3e rang mondial pour le montant total d'investissements directs étrangers, derrière les États-Unis et le Brésil, qui sont tous les deux beaucoup plus nombreux que nous. Et nous attirons encore plus d'investissements au bénéfice de chaque génération de Canadiennes et de Canadiens, et au bénéfice de notre environnement. I just want to conclude by sharing some really good news from last week. Moody's, one of the leading credit ratings agencies, reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating with a stable outlook. Moody's also predicts that over the medium term, Canada will see more growth than some other AAA economies, and that inflation will remain near the Bank of Canada's midpoint target of 2%. This is a very powerful proof point. A AAA credit rating means Canada's economy is strong and resilient. It means our economic plan is fiscally responsible. It means we can afford to make the investments Canada needs and create the good jobs Canadians need. It means the federal government can invest responsibly and borrow at lower costs, as can other orders of government and Canadian businesses. Our AAA credit rating also shows that Pierre Poilievre would rather make inflammatory statements and mislead Canadians than admit the truth, which is that our government's plan is fiscally responsible. La réalité, c'est que le chef conservateur ne veut tout simplement pas faire les investissements nécessaires pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, pour faire croître notre économie et pour construire plus de logements plus vite. Il ne veut pas non plus demander aux plus riches de payer leur juste part. Il ne veut pas offrir aux jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens les possibilités qu'ils méritent. Alors que Pierre Poilievre et le Parti conservateur cherchent des excuses pour réduire des investissements dans les Canadiennes et les Canadiens, notre gouvernement agit maintenant. Et il le fait résolument, en mettant en place un plan économique responsable sur le plan fiscal, parce que les jeunes comptent sur nous. Merci pour votre attention et je passe maintenant la parole au ministre Sajjan. Harj, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Good morning from Vancouver, everyone. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Sorry I couldn't be there in person with you. I was just in the Yukon looking at some of the preparation work that the Yukon territories are doing for the upcoming wildfire season. And as you know, it is Emergency Preparedness Week in Canada, and it serves as a good reminder to start conversations with family, friends, and colleagues about the upcoming disaster season and the things that we can all do to keep ourselves safe. Now, some of us will be out again on Thursday to talk about the update to the long-term forecast. But for now, what I can say is that all signs are pointing to a challenging wildfire season coming ahead. Now, this is a direct and real consequence of the climate change crisis that we are facing. And Canadians know that the debate on this is over, and it is a fact. But it's extremely disappointing that we have conservative politicians in this country, led by Pierre Poilievre, who would rather tweet and attempt to mislead Canadians about the risk of climate change while Canada literally burns. We know the risks because the science is clear. Now, we are already over 79 fires burning in Canada, 8 of which are considered out of control. And in Old Crow, Yukon, community members are bracing for an intense flood at this moment. Now is the time to get prepared and do not wait. Do not listen to conservative politicians telling you to look the other way. The most important thing you can do right now is to know your own risks, prepare an emergency kit, build a family plan, and ensure that you have all the relevant information to keep you and your loved ones safe. because later is too late. And last year, what we saw very directly while I was in West Kelowna, I visited community members who made their homes fire smart. And in those areas, those homes were kept safe. So not only this kept them safe, their home safe, but also their loved ones as well. But it also kept the fire from spreading. So I encourage all Canadians to visit getprepared.ca for further information about making your home fire smart and for the other practical steps that you can take to be prepared. And know that the government will be there to support you during this season. And last year, we left no stone unturned, and we will continue to invest in measures to keep communities safe, because we know that when communities have accurate and up-to-date information about when extreme weather is coming, they can make better decisions. And that is why in Budget 2024, our government is investing in better weather tracking. And this builds on the recently completed upgrades of 33 state-of-the-art weather radar stations across the country, so that Canadians can have timely and accurate information about when and where extreme weather will impact them. And we know that Canadians want to protect their homes. So in Budget 2024, we made further investments to advance a low-cost national flood insurance program. Now, in partnership with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and with the province and territories, this is a very significant step to better protect homeowners across the country from the financial risks of climate change that they are already facing. We know that this year's season could be intense, just like the last one. But we are Canadians. We help each other in times of need. And during this Emergency Preparedness Week, I encourage your communities to get prepared. Thank you. And now I'll pass it on to Minister Wilkinson.
Thank you very much. Folks will know climate change is altering our world's natural environment in a myriad of harmful ways, something that became very evident last summer when we experienced the worst forest fire season on record. And beyond disruptions to daily lives, climate change has real and tangible economic costs to Canada. According to the Canadian Climate Institute, if we do nothing, the costs of climate change could eclipse $100 billion annually and result in over 500,000 job losses by 2050. Sitting on our hands and simply watching the planet burn, as Mr. Poilievre would have us do, is simply not an option. That is why this federal government has developed a plan that invests in emergency preparedness to respond to climate-induced disasters. This includes, in the most recent budget, an investment of $800,000 to further support the International Association of Firefighters with wildfire fighter training to help us to address the interfaces between municipalities that are proximate to forests. Un plan qui investit pour s'adapter à l'évolution du climat. And a plan that invests in bringing down our carbon emissions and in growing a prosperous, clean economy. One component of our plan to reduce emissions and to enhance affordability is a national green building strategy, which we will be bringing forward in the coming weeks. The National Inventory Report, which, as you know, outlines greenhouse gas emissions by year, and which was released last week, laid out the challenge ahead of us. Buildings remain the third largest source of emissions in Canada. We need to transform our buildings, our homes and our workplaces, to emit less greenhouse gases and to be more resilient in the face of a changing climate, while also ensuring that the energy used to heat and to cool our buildings is more affordable. La bonne nouvelle est que ces objectifs peuvent aller main dans la main. The Greener Homes and Oil-to-Heat Pump programs are proof of that. They have enabled thousands of Canadian households to reduce emissions while saving significant dollars through installing heat pumps and other efficiency retrofits. And in the recent budget, we announced we are building on the success of the Greener Homes program by committing to invest another $800 million in the Canada Greener Homes Affordability Program, a program that is focused on low and median income Canadians. It is a program that will allow Canadians to reduce their emissions while putting more money back in people's pockets. I look forward to sharing more details of our greener building strategy and the new Greener Homes program in the coming weeks, a strategy and an associated program that will ensure that Canadians have access to more affordable, resilient, and green places to live, to gather, and to work. So thank you for joining us today. Merci beaucoup, and I will pass it to my friend and colleague Steven Guilbeault.
Merci beaucoup, Jonathan. Bonjour. J'aimerais commencer par souligner que nous nous trouvons en territoire non cédé du peuple Anishinaabe, algonquin. Notre dépendance aux combustibles fossiles réchauffe la planète et accroît le risque d'incendie de forêt d'inondations, de vagues de chaleur et d'autres phénomènes météorologiques extrêmes. Telle est la réalité des changements climatiques liés à l'activité humaine, une réalité qui frappe de plus en plus de gens, ici comme ailleurs. Nous avons maintenant des données qui confirment que les incendies de forêt historiques, dévastateurs et coûteux de l'an passé, ont été rendus plus probables à cause des changements climatiques. La crise climatique continue de modifier les températures et les précipitations. Nous pouvons donc nous attendre à davantage de sécheresse et à un risque élevé de feux de forêt. Ces phénomènes perturbent la vie des Canadiennes et Canadiens, menacent leur santé et leur sécurité, détériorent la qualité de l'air et nous coûtent à toutes et à tous très cher. Les assurances couvrent peut-être la moitié des coûts des feux de forêt au Canada. Les contribuables paient le reste. Selon le Bureau d'assurance du Canada, de 2011 à 2020, les pertes assurées atteindront en moyenne 2,3 milliards de dollars par an, soit plus de 5 fois les pertes annuelles moyennes de 440 millions de dollars enregistrées entre 1983 et 2000, et coûteront plus de 3 milliards de dollars en 2023 en raison des feux de forêt. Nous n'avons plus d'autre choix que de jouer la carte de la défense, la préparation aux situations d'urgence. Mais nous devons aussi continuer à jouer à l'offensive, en réduisant la pollution pour atteindre l'objectif de zéro émission nette d'ici 2050. Et oui, nous avons un plan pour atteindre cet objectif. Si vous n'avez pas de plan responsable au niveau climatique, vous n'avez pas de plan pour protéger nos communautés, pas de plan pour la santé, la sécurité et les emplois des Canadiens et des Canadiennes. L'absence de plan climatique signifie que l'on ne protège pas la nature et la biodiversité qui contribuent à définir notre pays, ni les écosystèmes qui nous soutiennent toutes et tous. Les changements climatiques sont l'un des principaux facteurs de perte de biodiversité, tant à l'échelle mondiale qu'au Canada. Des événements graves tels que les feux de forêt de 2023 réduisent la disponibilité d'habitats essentiels pour plusieurs espèces menacées, comme le caribou boréal, l'une des espèces les plus emblématiques du Canada. We have a real climate plan to help Canadians. Pierre Poilievre has no plan. He has slogans: axe the facts, free the polluters, kill the bill. Today, we're here to talk about Emergency Preparedness Week and Budget 2024. Budget 2024 includes $6.9 million over 5 years, starting this year, for the Meteorological Service of Canada's early warning system for extreme weather events with a focus on floods and storm surges. Let me remind you that since 2016, our government has successfully modernized every weather tracking station in the country, including adding new station in Alberta's Athabasca region and new training facility, as we did on time and under budget. The increased reach of these modern radars mean that 99% of Canadians are covered. And every day, these radar stations are critical to early alerts for Canadians about severe and high-impact weather events. We continue to invest to get the job done, all part of our government's plan to deal with the reality of climate change for the goods of all Canadians. Thank you. Merci.
So we have about 20 minutes with the minister today, except for Minister Guilbeault. He has to leave for le Sommet de Montréal. So maybe we'll start with a question directed to Minister Guilbeault. Davis Legree, High Politics.
Thanks very much. Thanks for taking our questions, ministers. For Mr. Guilbeault and Mr. Wilkinson, if you want to chime in as well. Forgive me, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around the proposed changes to the Impact Assessment Act. I just want to make sure I have everything straight. So in 2021, the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government had jurisdiction over greenhouse gas emissions because global warming was in the national interest or of national concern, right? That's the basis for the federal carbon tax. But the changes to the IAA do not give the feds any ability to reject major resource development projects on the basis of greenhouse gas emissions. So I want to know, do you believe the federal government has jurisdiction over greenhouse gas emissions? And if so, why isn't that belief reflected in these changes?
Thank you for the question, Davis. I mean, you're absolutely right that in 2021, the Supreme Court of Canada said that the federal government had jurisdiction on issues relating to greenhouse gas emissions. It did, however, say that this was not a blank check for the federal government to do what we wanted regarding greenhouse gases or other environmental issues. In fact, in the opinion that the Supreme Court published last year on impact assessment, it did point to the fact that the Impact Assessment Act of Canada, and on parts of it, was an overreach by the federal government on provincial jurisdiction. So we have jurisdiction when it comes to climate change, which is why we've put in place measures like the clean fuel regulations, methane regulations for the oil and gas sector, zero emission vehicle standards. We're working on clean electricity regulations and the oil and gas cap. These are all things that we did not have. Some we're still working on, but many we've adopted since, that we did not have when the previous version of C-69 was adopted in Parliament, and the Supreme Court told us that on impact assessment we had gone too far. So we're course correcting, and so it doesn't mean that we won't be able to evaluate greenhouse gas emissions coming from projects, federal or provincial, but we won't be able to use greenhouse gas as the proposed changes in the BIA are currently written to prevent a provincial project from going forward. The Supreme Court, however, pointed out that on things like species at risk or migratory birds or navigable waters, the federal government still has jurisdiction for projects, whether they're provincial or federal provincial. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to add.
I understand you weren't looking to make these changes originally. I imagine you're hoping that C-69 would have been ruled or found to be constitutional by the Supreme Court. But I'm just wondering, yeah, because of that lack of federal oversight that we just went over, are you worried that leaving it to the provinces to potentially approve major projects that could potentially be emissions intensive could hurt Canada's ability to meet its climate targets?
No, I'm not, because of all these other tools that we have in our toolbox that we didn't have. Whether it's methane emissions, whether it's vehicles, whether it's refineries with the clean fuel standards, the electricity sector with the clean electricity regulation, or the oil and gas cap, which will ensure that regardless of what happens to production, emissions from the sector will come down over time. So these are things we did not have when C-69 was adopted. These are new tools in our arsenal that we have in Canada to fight climate change. So no, I'm not worried. Thank you.
I would just add that I think there's also a dynamic that has emerged in the last few years, which is increasingly businesses in all sectors are having to account for the carbon that's actually embedded in the products that they sell. You see that more and more with cement, for example, and a range of other things. That is creating a dynamic that is forcing people and industries across the board to consider greenhouse gas emissions associated with any new projects. That includes the oil and gas sector, but as Minister Guilbeault pointed out, the oil and gas cap actually effectively addresses that as well.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Guilbeault, you have to leave. Like I've been reminded that. Sorry. So, David Thornton, CBC.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, just it's keeping with the IAA. The Alberta government is responding to the amendments. They say that they weren't consulted. They said they weren't given a heads up on when the amendments were going to come out. So what's your reaction to that? And do you plan on incorporating their suggestions?
We've consulted numerous stakeholders, including provinces and territories, on what their views were regarding the proposed changes. Obviously, we don't tell what's going to be in the budget to people before the budget is out. But I think Alberta, just like everyone else, knew that this was coming. Both Minister Wilkinson and I have made several interviews where we said that the changes were coming imminently, because basically, until those changes are adopted, parts of the act aren't enforceable, and we can't approve any project right now, whether we would want it or not. So there is an urgency that needs to be taken into account. We need many of these projects to help us make the transition that is needed to transform Canada's economy, to create the good jobs that will be with us for decades to come, but also to achieve our climate targets and reduce our pollution levels in Canada.
Maybe just add that, I mean, certainly we did have conversations with Alberta as well as with other provinces about a number of provisions that were coming forward, not the specific legislative provisions, but certainly generally. I spoke at length with Ontario and Alberta about the nuclear provisions significantly. So I would say there was some consultation for sure, but in terms of actually consulting on the specific legislative changes, I can't remember a time that Alberta actually came here and proposed their legislative changes for consultation before they actually put them into their legislature. But certainly there were discussions.
Okay. On the oil and gas cap, Mr. Wilkinson, you could probably handle this. I'm sure you read that letter from the group of scientists who are calling on your government to not just implement the oil and gas cap, but to make sure it comes into effect before 2025 at the latest. For that to happen, we'd need to see draft regulations by this summer. Your colleague, Minister Guilbeault said we won't see draft regulations until fall of this year. We were supposed to see them by the midpoint of this year. So I guess what is your response to that? And also, are you gambling with such an important piece of climate policy if you keep kicking it down the road further and further and further to the point where it might be left to another government to implement?
Well, I would say a couple things. I mean, it is an important policy item, and certainly it will be important legislation. We are working as quickly as we can to move it forward. But with something as complex as this, you want to make sure that you get it right, and so we have spent time trying to ensure that we are getting it right. I can't tell you exactly when the legislation will come forward, but certainly we are endeavoring to move as quickly as we possibly can. It certainly would be ideal if it was actually in place before the next election, but you know, I can't commit to that today. But what I would say is the future of the oil and gas cap, just like the future of most elements of Canada's highly successful climate plan, are going to be contingent on having a government in power in this country that actually believes in climate change and believes in fighting climate change. And I would tell you the track record of Mr. Poilievre is awful in that regard, not only when he was a member of the Harper cabinet that did nothing to address climate change, but it's not something he ever talks about. So, you know, Canadians are going to have a choice whether it's in law or it's going towards being in law. They will have a choice, and those that value climate change, it's not Mr. Poilievre.
And can I just add one sentence to what Jonathan said? I just very quickly just want to say, I think it's really important to emphasize that in 2024, it is just not possible to have an effective economic plan that does not also include an effective climate plan. That is simply the economic reality today. The investments that Canada is attracting today are coming to Canada in large part because foreign investors recognize that we have a price on pollution and we have a strong climate plan. And that means they want to be here and make stuff here in Canada and create good jobs here in Canada, because the world, global markets, increasingly are not tolerant of things that are produced in an economy that is not underpinned by strong climate action. And so that's a really important part of what Jonathan has just been saying.
Julianne Pepper, Global News.
Minister Freeland, this question's aimed at you. Anyone else who wants to chime in, feel free. The Indian Foreign Minister is characterizing Canada as the main hotbed for Sikh extremists, suggesting that Canada welcomes criminals. What's your response to that?
It is so important that every single person in Canada feel absolutely safe and secure in Canada, that every single person in Canada enjoy a fundamental right in our democracy, which is the right to freely express yourself, and that every single person in Canada feels safe and secure. And I do also want to say, given some recent arrests, that Canadians who are members of the Sikh community may today be feeling not so safe and not so secure. And, you know, thank you for the question, because it gives me the chance to underscore on behalf of our government that their rights their democratic rights, their safety and security will always be respected and defended by our government. And I think you wanted Harj to maybe chip in.
Yeah, I just want to echo what the Deputy Prime Minister had just stated. It's extremely important for Canadians to have confidence in their independent police forces around Canada and also the intelligence services. And one thing I can assure you that I have the utmost confidence in them, and the Canadians can feel safe. And one thing in Canada, we will not tolerate any type of disinformation or misinformation inside our country. And there is currently an ongoing investigation, and we want to make sure that we protect the integrity of this investigation. And we take any allegations and information by any country very seriously when it comes to any type of criminal activity that's potentially taking place in our country. But one thing I can assure you, our police forces are independent. And as a former police officer, I can definitely attest to that. Thank you.
Sajjan, this is more aimed at you. The Globe and Mail is reporting that India wouldn't let the Prime Minister's plane land in Punjab during a visit in 2018 unless you and the PM agreed to meet with Indian government officials about Sikh separatists in Canada, including Hardeep Singh Nijjar. What is your response to that report?
Well, one thing I can tell you is that that report is not accurate. But I think we can all say there has been significant misinformation and disinformation by India on individuals in this country, including on myself and my family as well. And what I can say, as I stated before, that Canadians of any origin have the right to peacefully, and the key thing, word being peaceful, to express their viewpoints on certain topics, and that's what a good democracy allows for. And we take any allegations of any other wrongdoing very seriously. And I know that Sikh Canadians right now feel very confident in their police forces of the ongoing investigation at this time. But I can assure you that that last report is not accurate.
Mia Robson, Canadian Press.
I guess this is probably for Minister Wilkinson. Minister Guilbeault's not here anymore. There was a report this week that the carbon capture and storage facility in Alberta, the Shell one, it was almost 100% funded through various government streams of money, and that it was also getting 2-for-1 credit for its emissions. The Alberta Power Corp has backed out of a carbon capture and storage project because it's so expensive. Do you believe that carbon capture is something that can be funded if government isn't essentially 100% at the table?
Yes, I certainly do believe that for a whole bunch of different reasons. I mean, one is carbon capture and sequestration technologies are getting better, and over time they actually get less expensive, just like every other technology that goes through the cycle. But I would say that increasingly, companies, as I said before, are needing to account for the carbon that's embedded in the products that they sell. That is a forcing function to ensure that people are doing what needs to be done. That's true of Heidelberg in the cement industry that's looking at CCUS. That's also true in the oil and gas space. And increasingly, putting a price on pollution and escalating it over time actually creates the kinds of incentives that will drive people to deploy it. I would say that with respect to the Capital Power decision, there are various different ways that companies can make decisions about how they comply with regulations on greenhouse gas emissions. And certainly there are a number of different pathways for Capital Power to be able to actually meet the requirements of the clean fuel or clean electricity regulations, which will eventually come into force. They've made a business decision that they can actually meet those requirements in a different way. But as I say, there are going to be many different approaches and different sectors that I believe will use carbon capture technology. For those that say that the technology itself is not proven, I just say to them that's not true. The technology, the basic technology, has been around for a long time. It's a matter of scale and it's a matter of cost, and those are both things that are actually happening.
And the carbon capture tax credit has still not actually passed fully, I believe. But do you believe that that tax credit is enough to convince, particularly like the oil sands pathways to proceed with carbon capture and storage, given what we've seen in the last week about these projects and how expensive they are?
Well, look, I think that it's important to think about a number of different elements of the cost. And it's not just the CCUS tax credit, but the CCUS tax credit is a major contribution on the part of the Government of Canada to enabling these kinds of projects to move ahead. It pays effectively 50% of the capital. But on top of that, the Alberta government has come to the table with about 12% of the capital. We would say, as the resource owner that actually collects all the resource rents, Alberta needs to reflect on if anybody needs to do more, it's Alberta that needs to do more. But we also have made available things like contracts for difference, which are intended to essentially help to backstop the carbon price and the price of credits. I think there's also things Alberta can do there. They are actually the operator of TIER, which is the industrial pricing system. If they need certainty with respect to the carbon price to enable some of these projects going forward, Alberta can actually provide a lot of that certainty. But so could Mr. Poilievre if he actually came forward and said that he's going to actually maintain the price trajectory and an industrial carbon price. He is creating the kinds of uncertainty in this country that are preventing some of the investment that we actually need to see to both fight climate change, but also to actually move our economy forward. And so the Government of Canada has made an enormous contribution already. It's time for other folks to step up and to be part of this conversation.
And I just want to add, Mia, to confirm for you, the CCUS tax credit is in Bill C-59. It is moving towards being passed into law. All parties can help get total certainty for CCUS projects by helping us to get it passed into law, which I hope and expect will happen in the coming weeks. And, there has been, and your question reflects this, a lot of questions around, will this be passed into law? Will we have absolute certainty? The answer is yes, very soon. And I really think there is a compelling national interest to have that tax credit passed into law. There are 2 tax credits in ITC credits in C-59, CCUS and clean technology. There are 2 more in BIA-1, the clean hydrogen and clean tech manufacturing. These are really essential for the Canadian economy. We can get all 4 of these credits passed into law in the coming weeks, and really, we need to do that as a country.
Madame Freeland, je vais me permettre une question. Valérie Gamache de Radio-Canada dans le dossier.
Wow, c'est la première.
On fait des premières. C'est ce qu'on porte 2 chapeaux, c'est comme vous. Moi, je vais vous parler de l'Inde. Il y a eu le ministre des Affaires étrangères qui a dit, le Canada abrite des criminels. Là, il y a le haut commissaire qui s'adresse à une conférence à Montréal actuellement et qui table encore sur la relation négative avec le Canada. À quel point ça entache nos relations avec l'Inde, ce qui se passe actuellement? Et est-ce que vous craignez des répercussions?
Je ne peux pas commenter ce que l'autre commissaire dit maintenant parce que je ne suis pas là et ce n'est pas correct de commenter les commentaires que je n'ai pas vus, je n'ai pas lus. Mais en général, je peux dire quelque chose. Premièrement, notre priorité en tant que gouvernement, c'est protéger les droits et les libertés de chacun et chacune canadien. De protéger la sécurité personnelle, de protéger le droit de libre expression, évidemment sans la commission des crimes. Mais c'est le droit de chaque Canadien et c'est la priorité pour notre gouvernement. Nous prenons au sérieux tous les commentaires, les points de vue de nos homologues internationaux et nous allons toujours faire le suivi. Mais je répète et je souligne, pour nous, la priorité, c'est que chacun et chacune, chez nous au Canada, chacun Canadien, a le droit de la sécurité personnelle, a le droit de libre expression, et notre gouvernement le défendra toujours.
Et est-ce que le froid est là pour... Vous avez l'impression que le froid est là pour durer entre l'Inde et le gouvernement canadien?
Je pense que c'est absolument correct et c'est absolument compréhensible pour un pays démocratique de dire on va protéger nos citoyens, on va protéger la libre expression de nos citoyens, on va protéger la sécurité personnelle de nos citoyens. Évidemment, ce n'est pas permis de commettre les crimes chez nous et on va toujours faire le suivi s'il y a des allégations. J'ai pleine confiance dans nos services policiers. Mais moi, je trouve ça une position très compréhensible, très forte chez nous et à l'international, de juste dire simplement, nous sommes une démocratie, chaque citoyen, chaque personne qui vit ici a les droits démocratiques et en tant que gouvernement, c'est notre obligation de les protéger.
Bien, merci. C'est ce qui complète la conférence de presse aujourd'hui. Merci d'avoir été avec nous. Au revoir.
Au revoir, merci à vous.